Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and this amazing series. I'm Aditya. In this series, we are creating headless e-commerce application using Next.js and Garchi CMS. So without any further ado, let's begin with this video. Okay, so this will be our last video of this series where we have to just create the order and show the invoice. So save some time, I have written the code, but I'll go through the code line by line. So let me show you the quick recap of the entire website, how it looks like. So we have the products here, filters here, menu bar here. That's great. Then we select a product and then we can select the product, add to cart, boom, boom, and this one, boom, have product in the cart. If we go inside the cart there, now we can see our payment container being rendered where we have cart details and everything. Now next step is making this order successful, which is using orders API to complete this order. So let me show you the flow first. Before that, let me show you the documentation first. Okay, inside this docs, if you go to orders section, there you will see create an order API. So now this we will use to create our order. Now the good thing here is as we follow this cart items schema, so we don't have to work much on it when we are sending the order request or the API request because it's already there. Our cart already has that schema in place. Next thing we need to be careful of, like the attributes are also there, so that's fine. It's the same schema we are following. Next thing we need to be careful of is this other details. So subtotal amount refers to your subtotal. Now as this like the currently platform we are creating, it's more like an online bootcamp platform where you can book online boot camps. So there won't be any shipping amount for this because we won't be shipping our courses anywhere. It's going to be all online. So this is going to be like, this won't be picture when we send API requests. Total amount would be the calculated total. Currently we are not having any tags, but you can add it as a separate parameter. But when you charge it, you need to add it in your total value. Customer UID, because currently we have a registered customer, so we'll be just using this customer UID that we have, which we are currently storing in cookies. We don't have any coupon code or we don't have any coupon ID because we are not using any coupon currently, but of course there is coupon APIs. So if I go to discount, inside discount, you can use the coupon API to validate a coupon. For that, you first need to create a coupon as an admin from your dashboard. So currently I'm logged in as a seller, but you need to log in as an admin and then create a coupon. And once you create a coupon, then you need to validate your coupons. So that thing you could do with using this validate coupon API. So then we have the next thing going back to the order. So coupon ID, if the code, like when you validate the coupon, you will get the coupon ID. So if the coupon is being used, then you need to pass the coupon ID, you need to pass the coupon code, you also need to pass the discount value. So these details you will get it if you're using the coupon API or if you have used the coupon API. Next, we will have the notify seller option. So in case if you want to send a push notification to the sellers, it's web push by the way. So if you want to send the web push notifications, then you can just either say yes or no, guest name, guest email, guest contact. Now this is where if you remember, like in most of the previous videos, I was saying that you can do other part of something, like you can use third-party authentications like Firebase, AWS Amplify, or anything else. So if you're using those things, then you don't need to pass customer UID because customer UID is related with Garchi's authentication. If you're using third-party authentication or authentication of your own self, then you need to pass in this guest name, guest email, and the contact detail where the phone contact is for phone number. These three things adds like a key value parameters. The reason you need to pass this because when you go to your order, so if I go to let's say orders over here, now if I want to see the customer details, so you can view the customer details from here. So you just need to make sure that you're either passing the customer UID if you're authenticating the user or guest details in this format if you're having third-party authentication. Delivery address, in this case it's going to be any because we are not delivering again anything. Like max you could do is like put here online, just in case like if you want to put some online channels name like Zoom or Teams. Payment ID would be our payment intent that we will pass or that we will get once the payment is successful. And payment provider in this case would be Stripe. You can also use PayPal, Razorpay, or any, if like these are the accepted values. But if you don't have, if you're not using any one of these, if you're using something else, you can just pass the payment provider as other. So that's how the order API looks like. Pretty simplified actually here. So we now need to proceed with our payment. So before that, let's see the code behind it. So I have created an invoice page over here. Inside our pages folder, we have the meta tag or meta component, which is just our SEO thing, like those head component wrapped in a meta component. Then we have a title component to show the title, and the invoice table component to show the invoice details. So we'll get to that invoice table in a moment. Now going back to this cart table over here, now here I have made certain changes. They're not like a very I would say like they are not very major changes. They are minor changes. It's just that to reuse the code, I have wrapped this commented code into a separate function, which is inside this our helper class, or inside this assets card.js class. So what we need is, now when we are calculating a total, we need that get display card, because that get display card or our display card has that option or that feasibility or that feature to calculate the total. So that code I have wrapped it in in a function so that we could reuse it in the invoice table component. So if I go back over here, like this is the code we have just commented out. So we just wrapped it over here inside this card.js. So this .card refers to our card, because as the card is stored in local storage, so we can just get the card from there rather than getting from the context. So either way works. So now let's see what inside this code. So here, like we have already seen this code before. Just let's do a quick revision. So we are first getting the unique product IDs from the card, because in that card there could be multiple product IDs. Then we are saying that okay, from those unique product IDs, we are saying that okay, we want to use those unique product IDs and get the list of products based on those IDs. Once we have the list of products, then we iterate through each cart item, and we create a separate cart. So first we go to the first item, then we will filter the required products. So that required product would be, because we need the price for that product, so the required product will be whichever item ID or whichever cart item's product ID we are iterating through matches the actual product ID over here. So cart items product ID matches the product ID over here. Once we have that, next we set the attribute price, because we need to calculate the price for attributes as well. So we'll just set it to 0, like a default, like an initial value. And then over here we say, okay, if the cart item has some attributes, then in that case we go through that each attribute, reduce it. So we can use the reduce function to calculate the sum. So we have the previous value, the current value we are iterating through. So in this case, we have 2 dates and 1 time. If I go back over here, so we have like 2 dates, 2nd March, 3rd March, and time is just 1 over here. So we iterate through each of these, see if there are additional values associated with it, and if they are associated, we just add it. Once we have the final value, then what do we say that okay, we will have a new cart item which would be having 2 extra parameters. So that's why we are using spread operator, because we just need to merge 2 objects. So we are using spread operator here. We are saying that okay, in that cart item we will have 2 extra operators. One will be the actual base price, which will be the product price multiplied by quantity, and then you will have the attribute price, which would be the attribute price like the total attributes price that is being selected over here. So that would be your okay, one thing we need to do here is we also need to multiply this by quantity, because if there are like 3 of these, then this needs to be multiplied as well. Cart item dot quantity. Okay, so if I let's give it a try actually to see if it works really. So this is, if I go, this is 2nd, 3rd March and 9 to 10. So if I go again to home, 2nd, 3rd, let's add the same product, because if we use the same attributes, it will add it as a extra quantity. So 2nd, 3rd March and 9 to 10, 2 products. Then if we go to cart, so here we go, perfect. So this is what we want, like, because the same attributes, same products, then the quantity also should be doubled. Oh, sorry, the price should be also be double, because we have 2 quantities. So this is great. This is what we want. Now next thing, if I go back in the code again, so we have the display card, and then if we go to our this card table, which is this one over here, so we'll first initialize the cart object, which is this cart class, which is this one over here. So we initialize the object, and once we initialize the object, we say okay, from that object we can use that object to get the or call the display cart function as this is going to be an asynchronous function, because if I go back to over here, if you see, like, this is an async function because we are doing some await here because we need to make a local API call, then that would return a promise, and then we can resolve that promise which will have our display card data. Then we'll set the display card products with the card data, and then there was another use effect here to calculate the subtotal. So as we are already getting it through a function, so we don't need this use effect anymore. So you can simply go here and say, okay, if the card data is empty, then we don't do anything, but if the card data is there, then we calculate the subtotal. Like this piece of code, this one was exactly in the use effect. Now it is being switched over there. So once this is done, we just need to like somewhat replicate this code or use the code inside our invoice table. So how it works for invoice table. So first thing we need to do is when we start from payment actually, this from previously we were going to card page, now we will go to the invoice page. At that invoice page, which will have this invoice table component. So if I go back to that invoice page over here, so that invoice table is they're not taking any prop, that's fine. So inside this invoice table, now what we need to do is first we need to get the cart items. That we can get it from our local storage or either through the context. Either way works because they both have the same values. So first thing we are going to check is if there is already an in order process, because what will happen is, suppose when I go back to this component again, this page again, let's say I refresh the page as a user, because some users might do this, but let's say they are thinking, oh, it's taking a lot of time to render, so let's refresh it. So at that time you might make double API call. So to avoid that double API call, what we need to do is whatever was the last invoice, we store it in our local storage, like the invoice number only, nothing more than that. Then we see in our local storage, okay, the invoice number was there. So then we can simply retrieve the invoice using order APIs. So if I go back to the documentation, if I go over here and say get invoice or order details, it just needs a invoice number as a URL parameter, and it will get the invoice details. So that we have, like, our local API is being written here. So this API, our local order API, this is actually a good example where you could use get and post request in one API. So how it works is, suppose if your request is a post request, then it will create an order. Suppose if your request is a get request, then it will retrieve the order details. In any case, we need to retrieve the order details. I will tell you why. So let's get back to this code again over here. So what we are doing here is, okay, we are saying that, okay, this is a get request. So this part will be skipped, this part, and then it will straight away go to this part, get the invoice details or order details and pass it to the front end. So once we have that invoice details, we can just simply like set it to our invoice and render the invoice. Now, what if there was, like, this is the first time that this page is rendered, like you did the order, you completed the payment, and you come over here. Then what we do is we see if the local storage if it doesn't has that invoice, then in that case here we could simply do like this. We could say, okay, get the cart instance first. From the cart instance, exactly the same function, get the subtotal that we will get over here by doing some reduce on the card display card data. Then once we have the subtotal, we can then use our again local API with post method to create the order. So let's see what is this doing over here. So how it works is, if I go back over here, this as we saw the schema for API, we have the cart items in appropriate format. We have the payment provider, which is Stripe. Payment ID would be our payment intent, that is going to come from front end. Total, the calculated total. Customer UID, we can decrypt it from our cookies. Delivery address, I'm just putting there online. Now this details which are coming from here, they will be passed to our local API. Then once everything is successful, we will get an invoice. Once we get the invoice, what we will do is we will set it to the local storage variable. So inside this local storage key, to this local storage key, which is last invoice, we'll set the value of the invoice number, and then we will set the value of entire invoice details to our use state, which is this one over here. Now, how to get that payment intent? Because that will be in the query parameter. So if I now show you the actual process. So if I go over here, let's put a random card number and some random postcode, pay, and there we go. We have our invoice ready, and you'll see like the cart is empty again, because I'll show you where we are removing that. But we need this payment intent over here, this one. So how to get this payment intent? Well, pretty easy. We could use next router to get the query parameters in the URL. So we import use router from next router. Then we initialize the router object over here. Now next thing we need to be very careful of is need to make sure that this API request is only made if we have the payment intent. Okay, or this use effect should only run if we have the payment intent, or if there is any change in the router query. So we need to literally look for this payment intent inside the router query for any change, because initially, like as it's a hook, so this would be null till this use effect comes in effect. And once everything is done, like there will be this use effect will be running for 2 times, because this would be null on first instance, the router object, and once it gets the value, it will run again. So this thing will run again because we are watching for this value, and then when it run again, then it can function properly. But in case if it if it doesn't function, then it will just terminate over here. If it's null, it will terminate here, because on first instance there won't be last invoice sent saved in local storage, nor there will be router query, because it's going to be null on first instance. Now as this will return back, so if we go back again over here, now then on the second run, like when this use effect will run on a second time, when we go to this page for first time, at that time it will go through this part of this code. So we can use router object, target the query, and inside that query parameters we could say, okay, we need payment intent, because that is how it is written here. If you see this part, payment intent, so that we need it. So we will say router.query.payment intent, the calculated total, and once we have this, like this order API is successful, once we create the order successfully, then over here in the API, we need to get the invoice details, because we need to show that invoice. So the order API will return you the order details. So this is how it looks like. So you'll see like this is the invoice number, these are the line items, then there's a payment transaction details. So this is what we are getting from the API side. Now if I go back over here, this thing over here, sorry, this thing. So once we get the invoice detail from our local API, we set it, the invoice number, to the local storage and to our invoice use state, and we remove from the local storage the cart details. We'll just simply remove it, and our context also need to know that it is being removed. So we'll set our context, which is our this one, to blank with an empty array like this. Now once this is done, at the end we will get again the invoice details. So this invoice details will be received using the invoice number that we got over here, and then we can use, or rather it will terminate on when we create the order, but for the next instance it will use this invoice number to get the invoice details from the API, set it to the invoice, and that's it. We will have our invoice being rendered. Now the next thing is rendering our invoice correctly. So we could reuse that cart header component, because we will need the same headers over here, like item type, quantity, unit price options. And then we could say for the body, what we could do is we could have each row, then we can pass the line item. So line item has the products, so that we have name. For line item we have the quantity, because if I show you the schema, it looks pretty interesting. So if I go over here, you will see line items, then it would be delivery address, etc, etc, etc. These options is now a string, so we'll check that how to deal with that as well. And then we have the products, which is this one. So the product details we can get it from here, and we could use this price to multiply the unit price, and then the attributes we can also add it, like this is +2, this is +1, this is actually should be multiplied by quantity as well. So let's quickly do that in a moment. So inside these attributes over here, so we need to pass the quantity for that line item over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say quantity equal to line item dot quantity, and then we can cache the quantity here, and then we can multiply this over here like this. Okay, let's see what it looks like, and refresh. There we go. So plus 4 plus 2, so we just need to multiply by 2 because they have selected the same product for same attributes in quantity of 2. So once we multiply it, so we will get the actual value, which is 86, because that's what it was charged. Then now we have this line item option, so we need to pass, like as it is a string, JSON string, we need to convert it or parse it into a JSON object. So those attributes will come over here, and now here is the main challenge actually, to render or show inside a React component a for loop rendered JSX. Generally we use map function to do this on an array, but in this case what we need to do is we need to use for, like vanilla for loop in JavaScript. The reason we are using this because this attribute is going to be a JSON object and not an array, and you cannot use map, reduce and filter on JSON objects, so you need to use it on arrays, those three functions. But when it comes to objects, what we could do is we could target it like this. So we will say, okay, for each object, so if I console these attributes, console.log attributes will be attributes, and if we see this over here, so you will see like the date, then the two selected dates, like it's exactly the same price, sub attribute and whatnot, then the time and the two selected time, sorry, one selected time. So what we want is we want to show that name is this key, this date, and the value of it is that array. We need to just join it with string separated. So how do we do it? We say, okay, we will just have that JSX, so name, and then we will say inside of each, or in this each attributes, that we will iterate. So inside that object, when we say key k, or whatever variable you say with var k in that object, it refers to this key over here, this key, this date and this time. So I'm saying that, okay, the k would be here on the first iteration will be date. Then I'm saying, okay, the selected one, it's just a text, like nothing to do, nothing more than that. And then I'm saying if that date has some values, then what we need to do is for that attributes key, which is date, we can now use map because that thing is an array. This thing is an array actually. If you notice, it's literally an array. It's array of 2 elements. So we will map it, and we will just like create a array, a different array, which will return us the sub attribute, which gonna be just a string actually. So sub attribute value, which is this second March, and then those round brackets and the price into quantity, so the calculated price, and then whatever array we get, we join it with comma. So this is how we can convert the array to string using join operator. So once we have that, we push it inside a new array. Now this JSX, now that map function does nothing different. It only gives you a list of those components or JSX, whatever you like, the map function is returning. So in the same way, we can create an array, and we can just like explode that array over here. We can just like print that array, and that would be just this JSX one after the other. So if I go back over here, we have that exactly as it is. So this is how you could use the order API. Let me see if I miss anything. I guess yes, everything is done. So this is how you could use order API. I can understand it's too many things to take in, but like the main basic here is that once you complete the payment, you make a request to the order API, and then you can use this invoice details or render these invoice details anything, like anyhow you like. I have just shown my way of doing it, and like let me know in the comment section what, like how things you did differently, or what did you do differently, and let me also know, like, was there any issue that you face while rendering this invoice or anything. So thanks again for watching this entire series. If you have made till this far, thank you very, very, very much. Thank you for supporting my channel, and thank you very, very much for liking and sharing my videos so far. So if you feel this video is worth sharing as well, please do share with your network. Please do hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. And yeah, I guess that's all. And I'll see you in the next video. So till the next time, goodbye.